as we foreshadowed right at the outset today, it's time to go to northeast Arnhem Land now, where instruments are being tuned and checks being made for the imminent start of this year's Garma Festival. Now, we will be taking you to the opening ceremony when it begins just a little later. But to set the scene in advance, the ABC's Dan Bourchier is there and we'll get some initial observations from him now. Dan, welcome. I guess the crowd's building there behind you. Why don't you take us back a step though, Dan, and set the scene. What is the significance of this year's festival?
Well, huge significance in a word, Greg, and it's good to be with you here from this very special part of the country on Yolngu country here. This is Gumatj land in the Northern Territory. This is an event, this Garma Festival, that hasn't been able to take place for a number of years now because of the COVID-19 pandemics. And of course, there is a real concern about the risk of threat as we're seeing that wave across the country right now, and there are many precautions in place here. But this is really about coming together, having big conversations, celebrating, as you can hear behind me, just ahead of getting underway with the formal proceedings here, having big conversations about who we are as a nation, what sort of Australia we want to be, and just how we're going to get there. Now, I understand, Greg, that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has now arrived here and will be kicking off those proceedings along with the Gumatj leadership very soon.
Yeah, we might come back to, I suppose, the most preeminent of those big conversations you're alluding to in just a moment, Dan, that of course being constitutional change. So just hold that thought. But just on the artistic front and cultural front, the program, what's the rundown feature across this evening, or for that matter, the whole festival this weekend?
Well, Greg, so much of it is about storytelling, and the Yolngu people generously inviting the more than 2,000 people that have gathered here to share in their stories of this part of the country that has these tens of thousands of years of connection, but also about bringing your own story here. And the point has been made that the stories that come from this land are as much belonging to the Yolngu people as they are to all Australians, as we all are part of the great storytelling of contemporary Australia. There are, of course, lots of speeches, lots of dialogues, key forums, discussions. There are dances. You're going to be seeing that a little bit later. The Bungal, important cultural dance that brings about change, that is about welcoming us in, not through words and not through a spoken form, but through dance, through song that connects so powerfully to the song lines, the storylines of this land. And of course, Greg, that's one of the things that connects Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people as Australians from whatever corner of Australia they're from. It's about those storylines and that deep, deep connection to country. And
they are coming from all corners of our very large continent, some by air. In the Prime Minister's case, Dan, you've already pointed to it, he is already landed with a plane load of politicians. That's not by accident, but by design, because what is it that we understand broadly about the introduction that he's going to make to the voice and referendum deliberations?
Well, you'd have to say, Greg, that there's great anticipation about just what will the Prime Minister say in his keynote address just behind me tomorrow morning. It must be noted that some of the first words that came from the Prime Minister after he won the election were for calling for that voice and for that enshrinement in Constitution to be entrenched in this conversation. That's a point that the Prime Minister has made here in Australia, right around the world at events that he's been attending as well. And so there's a sense of anticipation about just what will the Prime Minister say tomorrow at this, his first major address on Indigenous affairs that is completely focused on the future and the well-being of First Nations Australians. Now, of course, there is a lot of consideration about just what way might the Prime Minister go. Is this going to be a consideration of what date a possible referendum would be, whether or not this would be enabling words into the Constitution or a broad broader conversation about what the voice could and should look like. Is this in fact about a pathway to having that vote, and how we have that conversation about a referendum? Because as you know, and as most of your viewers would be aware, Australians are unlikely to change the Constitution willy-nilly. We know that there have been 44 referendums put, just 8 of those have been successful. Interestingly, the most successful in Australia's history was that which counted for the first time Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Australian citizens, showing the goodwill in 1967. The leadership that have been leading this charge in the Uluru Statement say now it's about being heard, being included in the conversation.
All right, and to that end, I think you have near to hand there, don't you, Dan, Sally Scales, who you might be able to bring into this conversation. I'll hand to you, and yeah, let's gather some more thoughts, since that is the primary purpose of the Garma Festival. Thoughts on where that process might lead us.
Yeah, most certainly do, and I'm really thrilled to invite in Sally Scales, Pitjantjatjara Woman, who's part of the Uluru Statement leadership and APY artist. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
For starters, this is a Garma Festival we haven't had for a number of years. Just what does it mean to you?
I mean, Garma's pretty special because it showcases to me the ambition of Aboriginal leadership, you know, for Yolngu mob to come together and have this event and sort of showcase what they're about and say, you know, welcome, come here, have these really important conversations, but also see our important conversations and what we're about. And I think that's incredible. And you know, it's always great to show the best foot, and I think they do it all the time, and it's amazing. I mean, look, it is scary with COVID still out there, and we have to be very cautious about that because we know our Aboriginal communities are suffering quite badly with COVID, but you know, it's always great to be here and seeing that incredible leadership from the ground up.
When you talk about important conversations, leadership, they say you change the government, you change the nation. We now have a Prime Minister who is putting Indigenous advancement squarely at the centre of public policy. I wonder how you reflect upon what you've heard so far.
I mean, look, I have to say, having the backing of Albanese, but also having that government, Albanese government coming on board and really embracing the Uluru Statement is incredible. My thing is, it's still, we need to have that conversations with the wider Australian public. You know, the Uluru Statement was gifted to all Australians. We need all Australians to be a part of that conversation. You know, it's about them as well as, you know, the politicians to have that messaging and to keep pushing. And I think we just go back and say, you know, this was gifted to you. So you know, Uluru Statement was gifted to all Australians about how do we get a voice and into the Constitution, and we have to sort of lean in. Our civic responsibilities is about having that conversation and leaning in. Because a referendum, yes, it's hard, but we haven't had a referendum in this day and age yet, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, with social media, trust, or lack of trust in governance institutions. What are you hoping to hear from the Prime Minister in that speech tomorrow?
If it was up to me, I would love to.
Right, speech writers beware.
If it was up to me, would obviously hopefully see a date for a referendum that we can go towards, and then that way we can build in our campaign and keep messaging on, which is just making sure that everyone's around it and have a conversation about what that could look like.
Should that date be May 27 next year?
I would love to be in May. Like, having it on the anniversary is very key time, but I think the fact that if they committed to a timeline, it's great faith, really. So whatever the messaging is, we'll spin it in a good way.
Sally, you talked about the Uluru Statement being a gift to all Australians. For anyone who's not familiar with it, can you just give us a sense of what is it actually about?
Well, so the Uluru Statement, people forget that also this is a coalition of all sorts of statements that have come before it, you know, the Yirrkala Bark petition, the Barunga Statement, all of these messaging, all of these hopes and aspirations that First Nations people gave to the Australian government time and time again. And so when we were out at Uluru in 2017, the messaging was from that leadership, no, we can't we're not just giving it to government. And actually, we want all Australians to walk with us. We need all Australians to be a part of this journey with us, because it's you know, we need to utilise all Australians too, so they use their voice to enable a First Nations voice.
Such a powerful point to end us on, Sally Scales. Thank you so much for having a yarn with us today, but also the leadership in the way that you're hoping and aiming to bring all people along for this conversation.
I think it's a part. This is a history in the making time in our lives. History is calling, and how we're going to be remembered. You know, we have to change our communities for the better. We need to leave our First Nations community in a better than what we've got. So it's always about how do we change it, and we need to change that structure.
Well, look, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And Greg, you heard there that this is about a gift, about the next stage. This is a big conversation. We're going to be covering this here from Garma over the next couple of days, but this is just the start of a bigger conversation nationally. Greg, back to you.
Of course it is. Dan Bourchier, we will be coming back to you later this hour. We anticipate we will anyway, depending on timings there, because we do want to capture the opening of the festival. Thanks for that initial update.